This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And this week, I have another interview for you, this time with Adam Lance Garcia, author of From a Certain Point of View, Return of the Jedi, story, The Veteran. Everyone's favorite one. Maybe, I don't know. It's one of my favorites. We got to talk about his Star Wars journey and how excited he is to be part of Star Wars officially. And I'm excited for him. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. I'm so glad that I got you on for this, because I remember when you tweeted, I'm still calling it Twitter, and you were like, hey, I want to be on podcasts. And I was like, if I don't jump on this now, every Star Wars podcast in the universe is going to get in before me. So here we are.
You're actually only the third. So yeah, I don't know who else. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's more people who will put requests, and like, it's a new process for me because it's so my day job, as is well known, is like doing interviews for a living, and I'm so used to being on the other end of, like, literally I just sent a bunch of questions that need to get approved. And being on the flip side of it is really surreal for me. I'm like, I especially considering, like, I've been a fan for so long, and I've just been on podcasts as like a guest, and they're just like, oh no, you need approval. I'm like, right, yeah. I don't, and I'm just like, I don't want to, like, anger, I don't want to upset Lucasfilm, and I don't want to upset Del Rey. So I've gotten a bunch of them. Just go here, go to Lauren, go to Lauren, go to Lauren, go to Lauren.
And we did, and we're here. Isn't it amazing how that works? Publishing is great. Publishing, there's so many people involved that so many readers never get to interact with, and it's fun. It's fun to see, like, more behind the scenes of, like, how all this works, especially in terms of, like, when the book is coming out or it's already out, and how people hear about that book, and writers get to talk about it. It's really fun.
Trust me, being on the other side of it's really cool. It's been so cool. But I could trust me. Let's save it for the interview. Trust me, I'm gonna be as effusive as possible.
Well, tell me more about that. Tell me more about how you are feeling now that you wrote a Star Wars. Not only did you write a Star Wars, but it's out in the world. How does that feel?
It kind of feels amazing. There's been a lot of points over the last year, both from, like, before it was announced to since, where, like, if I'm, like, ever down, I'll just, like, whisper to myself, I wrote a Star Wars. Because it just kind of, like, lifts me up, because, like, when I tell you that this is literally my lifelong dream, I'm not even overstating it. Like, the dream is to hopefully one day write a novel, because, I grew up with the Legends EU. That was very much my Star Wars for so long, because we didn't have TV shows, we didn't have movies, we just had the original trilogy and countless books. So I remember, like, one of the first things I wrote was a Star Wars fanfic, Star Wars The Dark Crystal, no relation to the Dark Crystal movies. And it was a post episode 6 story. It was going, like, apparently Luke had to go to Endor to find a dark crystal. There's some stuff in there that I really like. I still like to this day. I never finished it, but, like, when I'm saying that this is everything I've always wanted to do, it's since I was a kid, just writing Star Wars prose specifically was just something the moment I was like, I want to write, I want to be a writer, I want to do this. And so much of my career has been through, I've grown as a writer in the public eye, and mostly small and mid-sized press. just to get this opportunity is just unbelievable, unbelievable, and to get the reaction that I've gotten with this story blows my mind. It just blows my I am stunned every single day by this whole experience.
I think for me, one of the most fun things about Factpov being announced was not only the fan reactions online, but the author reactions. Not only authors finally getting to be able to, because you couldn't talk about it before, finally being able to say, hey, I have a thing in this. This is so cool.
Yeah.
But also authors discovering other authors that worked on the book that they didn't know were also working on the book. That is like, I will remember that day for a long time, because it was like everyone was excited from on every side, every level of this book coming out. It's my favorite thing.
It's, you know, Kristen Baber and I have been friends for a very long time, and I had no idea that she was in this book. And the fact that I found out through the announcement just both impressed me by the fact that she could keep a secret that well, but also like, look, I'm so happy to be with like Adam Christopher, Mike Chen, authors who have been very, very supportive of me in my own writing journey over the years. I could go on about how wonderful every Star Wars author is at supporting other authors. It's amazing. But specifically with Kristen, it was and is so wonderful to share this experience with a friend, you know, like an actual friend. And seeing that reaction to her Slice Noodles story has been wonderful. And yeah, that one big day when you're like, oh, wait a minute, I get to share pages with this person, and like, you don't expect to be, especially for me, because I feel like, speaking again only for myself, but like I feel like the new kid on the block. You know, I feel very much this relatively novice author alongside giants, and there's a bit of like, one of these don't belong, and that's me, you know. But at the same time, it just being so honored and grateful to be sharing these pages, and it's the best.
You do belong. You belong because you're in the book.
I know. I mean, Elizabeth Schaefer took a chance on me, and Siglain as well, and Tom helped, you know, when he took over the editing, just shepherded it. Like, I know I belong, but it's still because, again, like I grew up with these books. Like, I'm still a fan. Like, I am still buying these books. I still went out of my way to go to Barnes and Noble to buy Tales of Light and Life, the exclusive edition, because I want to read Alyssa Wong's story. You know, I have the special editions of Brotherhood because I was in London for work, and I was like, well, I can go get to the Goldsboro bookstore and I can pick up the edition that I don't have. You know, I still have every single book from as most first printings from the EU. It's so, you know, it's not just like, man, I don't belong in, like the feeling of I don't belong. It's a surreal feeling of like, I'm adding a book to my collection that has my name on it. And then it's not even just like the adding to the canicity of it. It is I kind of came to this really full circle moment of like, there's going to be a book amongst hundreds, and I'm part of it. It's yeah, it's just weird. It's weird and wonderful. I'm going to keep on repeating myself the entire time.
And it's probably never going to feel anything other than that. You know, I mean, this book is in the world, and it's going to be in the world forever. And there's no turning back now. Sorry to break it to
you. No, and that's funny. It's just like, no matter what happens, whether or not, like, you know, I get to do another Star Wars story or whatever happens next, like, I've written a Star Wars. No one can take that away from me. And I feel, I don't know. Again, it's like, I really wish I could go back in time and tell my 16-year-old, 12-year-old self, like, hey, you're going to do it. I know how rare that is for anyone. And I hope that everyone gets an experience like this, where you can look back at the kids you were and say, Yeah, remember that really crazy, like very hyper specific dream you had? You did it.
You did. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about
Yeah.
the veteran and let's talk about Dex.
Yeah.
Because I know when this story in particular was announced, this is not a character that you would expect to appear in the original trilogy, and yet here we are.
No.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how this story came to be. Tell me everything. Not everything, but
Well, it's funny because the reality is the first percolations of the story started, I think, in 2020, 2021, where my friend Patrick Willems, who's a really talented YouTuber, and a really talented like just film critic in general, sort of made a joke tweet about Dexter Jester, a Star Wars story when. And I was going through, Patrick and I have had this sort of fake sort of, we like to frustrate each other on social media. We're very dear friends. We hang out often, but we'd like to give each other hell as much as possible. And I was going to write to him like, Patrick, you hate Star Wars, something silly like that. But it was very much, I saw that and my brain was like, well, what happened to Dex after Attack of the Clones? What happened to him in the original trilogy era? And this idea of like understanding or sort of exploring what it meant to be someone like who indirectly or arguably directly led to the Clone Wars, bearing that weight. And I was like, oh wait, there's a story idea here. And I kind of kept in the back of my skull. I kind of like ruminated for a while. And then there's a lot of things that happened in 2020 and 2021 that sort of like helped feed into that idea. So when Del Rey reached out, Elizabeth Schaefer sent me the email that is the best email I've ever gotten to this day. Would you like to write a Star Wars? I had already sort of had some inkling that it might be coming, that like I might be a part of this anthology. So I was already like ruminating about it and like, all right, if it happens, I know what I'm going to pitch. And I was like, Dexter Jester during the celebrations of Coruscant, everyone's celebrating, and he's like, nope, it's not over. And there's a few reasons to that. Because of this guilt, the idea of being feeling this guilt, but also having this thing that you've always wanted, this thing that you've always waited for your entire life, or for years, and it's great victory, and the people that you want to celebrate it with aren't there anymore. The part of it was like I knew no one would pick him. I mean, that was a little bit of like, I knew when I got the invite specifically, I knew that people were going to pick Ewoks, people were going to pick they're definitely going to pick like pilots and Jabba's palace, like and you look back at like Claudia Gray's excellent story Master and Apprentice in the first from a certain point of view, and then you look at like Chuck Wendig's Jar Jar cameo in the Aftermath trilogy, and I remember going to Elizabeth, and mind you, like I was in the audience for the signing of the very first From a Certain Point of View. I have both editions, and like I have one edition like with signed by all the authors. And I remember going to Elizabeth after I read Master and Apprentice. I'm like, is that canon? Because that's amazing. It's like, it's so cool to have this prequel trilogy character and getting their perspective on the original trilogy. And she's like, well, maybe, but can he be canon adjacent? But I love the idea of seeing, because now, especially now that we know what the saga is, now that we know how the saga ends, arguably, like we know what the mainline Star Wars Skywalker story is, and we have all the context of the prequels and the sequels, and now like the in-between stories with Andor and Ahsoka and the Mandalorian and all these different aspects. I was always sort of frustrated as a kid with the EU. I'm like, why aren't they mentioning the Clone Wars? Why are they not mentioning this character over there, over here? I want to see that. I want to get that context. So like all of that, from these sort of early percolations with the Twitter conversation to the emotions that I felt through 2020 and 2021 that sort of relate to the loss of my father. And then on top of that, my own like ancient frustrations of like, why are they mentioning the prequels in this book? Like, why is no one mentioning Padme? Now we know what the story is. And then seeing what Claudia Gray and Chuck Wendig did, it all sort of culminated. I'm like, okay, Dexter Jester, there's something I can do here that will be very, very interesting to me as a writer, something I want to see as a reader. And I felt like it's something, I don't know, I just felt unique.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me with books, with Star Wars books especially, how you look at the Aftermath trilogy and then you look at Shadow of the Sith and you see like, as canon has expanded, as we've gotten more movies, as we've gotten more shows, as we've gotten more books and stories, writers have more and more to pull from for the stories that they're writing now and the stories they're going to write in the future. And I think it's amazing that it just keeps getting bigger, and all the threads that you can connect between this story and that story and this story over here and a story that doesn't even exist yet. It's all connected. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that's the great thing. That's something that I always loved about the EU, and I love about like the books in general, is that it, and what I've always loved about Star Wars, just full stop, is that it's expansive. From the very, very first one, like there's always this idea, like there's adventures happen just around the corner, and being able to sort of like thread that needle between like, let's explore and expand this universe and see more and learn more about these characters, about these worlds, and sort of tie them together, but maybe not answering every question, but like giving that little like that, like, ooh, there's more here, showing that there's more. That's something that the books have done, you know, as better than anyone, in my opinion. But like, I might be a little biased because again, that this was such my fandom as a kid and till today.
Well, you've written a Star Wars.
I did.
You did. If you were to ever write another one, maybe, is there a character or characters that you maybe would want to write a story about?
The one that always comes to top of mind, there's two that I would love to do. One is a character, one is an era. Character is Rey after episode 9.
Yes.
And there's a lot of, especially now that we know there's going to be a sort of a story 15 years later. I going back to what I loved as a reader was that when I first read Glove of Darth Vader, and that was the first Star Wars book I ever read, to Heir to the Empire, and what even excited me about when the sequel trilogy was first announced, but like that era of post episode 9, episode 6, was just so exciting because there's more stories. And I definitely want to do that for this generation, where like give these fans that sort of next step, like what happens after the heroes win. And I think for Rey specifically, there's a lot of really interesting storytelling opportunities of someone who, and I've said this elsewhere, but like with Luke, you know, while we're getting some answers to that question, you know, he still had a lot of training from Obi-Wan and Yoda when he started like rebuilding the Jedi Order. And there's a sense of like him going out and searching, now that we know that he had Ahsoka and other people around him. What I find interesting about Rey at this period of time is like all she kind of has is the books. So she's sort of restarting this Jedi Order from really like almost like the Dead Sea Scrolls of the Jedi. And how does that form? How does it form where like she grew up with these legends and these myths, and she needs to restart the Jedi in a more idealized version? And what does it mean for like a world that's seen like, you know, 60 years of war because of the Jedi versus Sith? What's the next stage? What's the next step? I think there's so many cool stories you can tell with her afterwards. You know, and the other era is like the High Republic. Just I love the High Republic in general. I've said this to Michael Siglain. I've said it to all the authors. But what I love about the High Republic era is that it's kind of everything I love about Star Wars books, specifically in Star Wars in general. Is, you know, it's this 200 years. I think Charles Soule said this, like, it's 200 years earlier. So there's elements about that era that are very familiar and very like that we can touch, like Yoda and Jabba, and it kind of feels like the prequel, but it's a little more idealized version of like what we kind of imagine the Jedi were when Obi-Wan says 1,000 generations, kept, back in the New Hope. So, but there's also the sense of anything's possible, that like they're still discovering the galaxy. There's still parts that they don't know yet. And because it's the way it's established from in Light of the Jedi, and even in phase 2, you get the sense like there's so many places you can go. There's like the Pathfinder teams. There's even like the Vessel and that team were just like this weird this sense of exploration. And I love the way the Jedi are portrayed. They're a lot more I would almost say like progressive in their ways, that they have wayfinders and all that. I think it's just such a cool era. If there's one era that I would love to write in, it's that.
And with Rey, there really hasn't been a lot written about her. Mostly because when they were doing the books all around the sequel trilogy, she was in a few of them, but her story had to be on the big screen. They couldn't really like touch her that much. So now, depending on, there could be so much. She could have a whole series.
Yeah,
that would be cool.
I would love that. I just think, again, there's like, I like Rey as a character. I've always liked Rey as a character, and because it is very much like she in some ways is like the sort of fan insert, like I'm this big fan. I grew up like believing in these stories, and then she gets to meet them and realize like, oh, they're flawed and human just like me. And it's a lot more complicated of a story than I thought. And I think again, that sort of post episode 9 era in general is interesting, because like they have to restart the galaxy. What does that look like? How does the new Republic form? Because we now see that like all the lessons that the mistakes they made during this, after the Galactic Civil War. So I think, there's so much there.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get to write it. Hope you get to write
Me too.
all the things.
Thank you.
Yeah. Congratulations again on finally getting to write in the Star Wars universe. And I'm sure, based on what we saw in The Veteran, you're not going anywhere. You'll be back. So, and I'll have to have you. That. Yes, I'll have to have you back on to talk about the future stories that I'm sure you're going to write.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, I hope so. But at the same time, it's like, if this is my only Star Wars, I'm exceptionally proud of it, and I'm just I am so grateful to the fan community. And the other Star Wars authors for welcoming me into this with open arms. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate this.
Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devora Mondum and is written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. Keep up with the show on our Substack at starwarslitpod.substack.com. You can support the show by paying for a subscription to that Substack. You don't have to, but you can. You can also buy a Star Wars book through our affiliate link with bookshop.org. You can support your local independent bookstores if you do that at the same time. That's really cool. You can also start your free Audible trial with our link, which I fixed. So now if you click on it and get Audible through that, I will get something back. And that's also cool. More interviews are on the way, probably. So I hope if you enjoyed this one, go back and listen to some of the other ones. And there will be more to come in the future. Maybe soon. Who knows? I don't. We'll see. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram.